He is a retired doctor, a trauma orthopedic surgeon who became a police officer. He's seen trauma from all aspects. He's here to tell his story and much more. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The show is brought to you by OPPS, Operational Police Protective Services. They provide professional, safe, and effective security services in Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, and Pennsylvania, and will be expanding to other states soon. Get more details at oppsprotection.com. Contact us from Illinois. We have Dr. Martin Greenberg, who's also, in addition to being a retired orthopedic surgeon, trauma surgeon, he's a retired police officer from Orland Hills Police Department in Illinois. Prior to that, he was a Tinley Park, Illinois police officer. He's been on both sides. He's author of the book, The Law Enforcement Medical Encyclopedia. Doc, thanks so much for your service, and thanks so much for being guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Very much appreciated.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here.
And I got to say this, the doctors, by the way, your name, Martin Greenberg. My former partner was Robert Greenberg, who is a police captain outside of Miami, Florida. Really, really good guy. So it's the kind of name you don't see that often. And the first thing is like, oh, why is he emailing me? And it turns out it was you. So the second thing I want to say is this. Our trauma surgeons at Shock Trauma in Baltimore and Johns Hopkins in Baltimore saved so many lives. People that we thought that had no chance, they survived. Other hospital emergency rooms did the same thing. And some people, unfortunately, no matter how hard they tried, they didn't survive. And some that did survive with horrific lifelong injuries. So all of your efforts are very much appreciated.
Thank you. Shock Trauma started the idea of a trauma network, which we began to pick up in Chicago around 1987.
And it seems like 87 is a lifetime ago. I know people that weren't born then. I was policing. It was a different time, a different era. But a lot of what the shock trauma model, and I'd love to hear your input on this, was based off of military combat. Am I wrong?
That's correct. The whole idea focused around the idea of the golden hour of trauma. And back then, the idea was that if you could get a severely injured person to a level 1 trauma center within an hour, you had over a 90% chance of saving their lives. And that was the idea also behind tactical emergency medical support, which we developed because in tactical medicine, when you have a SWAT incident, there's an outer perimeter, an inner perimeter, and through EMS protocols, no one is allowed inside that inner perimeter until the scene is safe.
Right.
And that includes the officers, first responders, bystanders, and even perpetrators are denied the level of medical care that everyone else receives. And that was, we thought, unacceptable. We thought that law enforcement and everyone inside an inner perimeter, which could be a huge number of people, were entitled to that same immediate high-level medical care to save their lives that the rest of America was receiving at that time.
Now, before that, and I'm not knocking our EMS, this is not a critical comment, but before that, before the whole shock trauma model started going across the country, our basically our firefighters that manned AMBOs were AMBO drivers. That's all they did. They didn't do the whole EMT. They didn't do the first responder emergency medical care. And then we began to progress into the helicopters with the medical teams on board as well. Am I wrong there?
That's correct. Definitely certifications and training have been expanding dramatically over the last 20 years, and now most firefighters can man ambulances and be either basic level EMTs, intermediate level EMTs, or EMTPs, which we call paramedics, which is the highest level of EMT. And in fact, on the SWAT medical units that I've run, I've worked almost exclusively with paramedics who did a fantastic job of providing medical care in the field.
They were phenomenal. And I got to say this, I have a very weak stomach, courtesy of years of police work. I don't do trauma. I don't do bloodshed well. But I watched some of these shows, and there was, I can't remember the name of the show, example. It was medical combat trauma teams in Afghanistan. And they were picking up critically wounded soldiers, and they were going right into the bone, in the bone marrow with needles to start transfusions. I'm like, oh my. I've seen chest cracked. I'm sure you've been through all that. And I'm like, and we had to be there because in case the person made a dying declaration. But it was always horrific.
Well, I guess that depends on your perspective.
Your perspective of mine are totally different. I don't know how you did it, because it's organized chaos. When they say trauma, the physical trauma, the physical injuries is one thing, but it's so traumatic seeing the care that's given, and you've saved a lot of lives.
Well, we hope so. And I think we look at it more from a professional perspective, like a trauma represents a problem that has to be treated, what steps are necessary to go about treating it, and we have to make sure we have the protocols, the equipment, and the training to provide, good medicine, quote unquote, good medicine in bad places, unquote.
Yeah.
That's our motto.
I don't know how you did it, and my hat's off to you. And I don't say that loosely to a lot of people, but it's one thing to be on the street, and it's one thing to, and I tell people this all the time. I was on scene many times when people took their last breaths, and we would lie to them. We were like, Ambo's right there. You'll be going to be okay. They keep hanging there with us, all that other stuff, and they passed away. And the last thing they saw was a Baltimore police officer, a Chicago police officer, or whatever location it might be. And then some of those people are in such bad shape. Between the ambo crews, the trauma crews, we would get news later on that they survived. And we're like, how did that happen?
Well, definitely every time we have a war, our level of medical care improves, because trauma surgery that was tried out on the battlefield then eventually makes its way down to civilian medical care. And there is an organization called Tactical Combat Casualty Care organization, which was started as a partnership between the U.S. government and civilian medicine, tried to bring as much of military combat medicine as fast as possible to the civilian arena so that we could benefit from what was learned on the battlefield.
And even though you were in the suburbs of Chicago, you still saw plenty of really bad situations and really bad injuries, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Chicago has a reputation of being the pretty much number one city in the country for trauma, so we definitely have seen more than our share of gunshot trauma, auto accidents, and et cetera, being at a level 1 trauma center in Midtown Chicago. Absolutely.
We're talking with Dr. Martin Greenberg on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. He is a retired trauma orthopedic surgeon, also retired police officer. We'll talk about why he got into police work, and also some of the traumas he endured on both sides of it. And he's author of the book, The Law Enforcement Medical Encyclopedia. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We got so much more heading your way. One of the questions I get all the time, why are you always promoting the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page? Well, because there's no better place on Facebook. That's it. It's simple. Everything about the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast is right there, including great photos, stories you'll want to see, you'll want to share, memorials to law enforcement officers who were killed in the line of duty, all that and more. Plus, old episodes of the show can be found on our Facebook page. Just do a search for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show on Facebook and be sure to click like and or follow. We'll see you there. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. OPPS, Operational Police Protective Services, provides professional, safe, and effective security services in Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, and Pennsylvania, and will be expanding to other states soon. And they're hiring security and protection professionals. Off-duty and retired police officers, deputies, troopers, agents, and military in good standing are all encouraged to apply. That's OPPS, Operational Police Protective Services. Get more details at OPPSprotection.com. Again, that's OPPSprotection.com. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is brought to you in part by Colonial Metals Group. Got questions about investing in precious metals like gold and silver? They have the answers and will take the time to help explain your options for protecting your financial future. Take advantage of a special offer for our audience and you'll receive a safe and up to $10,000 in free silver. Call 800-898-1841. 800-898-1841. That's 800-898-1841 or go online to colonialmetalsgroup.com/LET radio. Return our conversation with Dr. Martin Greenberg on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. He is in the Chicago, Illinois area. He's a retired trauma orthopedic surgeon. He's also a retired police officer, a trauma medic, retired from the Orland Hills Police Department in Illinois. Before that, he was a Tinley Park, Illinois Police Department officer. And in addition to that, if there's not enough already, he's author of the book, The Law Enforcement Medical Encyclopedia. Now, how long, Doc, were you working in emergency medicine in the trauma surgical area before you went into police work, and why? What motivated that?
I was an orthopedic trauma and hand surgeon in the Chicagoland area at multiple hospitals, including a level 1 trauma center in Midtown Chicago for about 20 years. And at that time, the Columbine incident in Littleton, Colorado occurred, which was in 1999. And that was really the first active shooter incident that gained national attention, as was its mishandling by the SWAT approach of creating a perimeter around the incident and allowing the mayhem to continue unabated inside. So actually, law enforcement was enabling the shooters with that approach. I felt that a different, more direct approach was needed, and that everyone inside the inner perimeter, including the officers, bystanders, and even the offenders, desperately needed the emergency medical care that they were being denied, because EMS protocols throughout the United States prohibit medical care entry into an inner perimeter until the scene is safe. Well, in the Columbine incident, that took over a day.
Yeah.
And so I thought that law enforcement, which was definitely an underappreciated, underfunded, and underrecognized profession holding our society together, the thin blue line, I felt, was an actual thing. And this led me to make a presentation to put in embedded medical support into SWAT teams to be sort of the tip of the medical spear inside that inner perimeter before the scene was safe. And I presented the proposal to the Board of Directors of the Illinois Tactical Officers Association, or ITOA, which is the largest SWAT professional organization in the country. And when I went there, I had recently read an article written by a gentleman named Ken Hubbs, who was the president and founder of the California Association of Tactical Officers, or CATO, and it was entitled Dynamic Emergency Rescue. And that article suggested that the immediate entry of trained officers into an active shooter incident was needed, along with embedded medical support. And I liked that article because it confirmed that this gentleman thought that embedded medical support with medics or doctors that would not hamper the performance of whatever the incident was a great idea, but also the idea of the immediate entry of tactical people into a situation to stop it as soon as possible.
And I'm a Neanderthal. I'm the stereotypical old police, Irish Catholic, knuckle-dragging Neanderthal, you name it. And one of the things that we were always taught, and we went in without a lot of training, I'll be honest with you, but we would go in and take care of business. And when we have an active shooter, and I know tactical experts are going to argue this point all day long, and they're allowed to, is the only way you can take someone out of an offensive posture, because they'll go to a mindset of game plan, is to put them on a defensive posture. So you got to go in there and you got to take care of business. Number one. Then you start addressing saving lives, whether it be the perpetrator or other victims. That was what we were trained from day one, and that was back in 1980.
Correct. And the idea of organizing that approach into a training program so that officers who were trained in what was called rapid response would be able to form a unit and immediately enter an active shooter situation, even if they were from different agencies, and have a good idea of what to do. The idea of contact teams and rescue teams following behind them was developed. And that night that I was mentioning, when we presented that program to the Illinois Tactical Officers Association, the idea of SWAT medical care was established, but also the idea of a rapid response program. And the ITOA began a train-the-trainer rapid response active shooter program where throughout the state, any trained officer would know exactly what to do and could form up with 3 other trained officers from even different agencies that might arrive at the scene promptly and be able to immediately become a contact team to go after the shooter. And the next 4 people would become the rescue team following behind them, taking care of injuries, clearing obstacles, etc.
So this is what motivated you to become a police officer yourself?
Correct. We felt that we needed to be trained as police officers to be able to work effectively inside an inner perimeter, because if you're on a rescue team, the rescue team could theoretically become the contact team. Depending
and you
on...
also don't want to become the victim. You can't help someone else if you're the victim of a crime.
Correct, and even understanding all the laws of evidence and not how to contaminate a crime scene or minimally contaminate it was very important. And the relationship that you develop with the team of mutual trust became very important as well. And so being armed, for example, we thought was important for TEMS providers, because that way we could provide our own security and we didn't have to pull tactical operators from their primary mission to babysit us while we were inside that inner perimeter, and also so that we would not be dangerous to them.
Look, you're preaching to the choir. All this makes total sense. And by the way, I've had guests on the show that lives were saved because of trauma, emergency care personnel that were embedded in police departments that were part of the thing. And we had a standard practice when we had really bad situations. We knew ahead of time. We tried to have paramedics there ready just in case. Granted, this was a long time ago. Things have changed quite a bit. The Columbine situation obviously had a profound impact on you. It did me as well. Parkland had a profound impact on me. The one that really got me going, I've been retired from police work for a long time, was Sandy Hook. And I had gotten used to not carrying a weapon, and it was not part of my daily routine, and that changed everything for me, because I knew I'm still the old Neanderthal, that if given a situation that occurred near me, I would go in there, and I at least need to have some sort of fighting chance. We're talking with Dr. Martin Greenberg on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. You can find us on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. He is a retired trauma orthopedic surgeon who became a police officer, now retired police officer, author of his book, The Law Enforcement Medical Encyclopedia. When we return, we're going to talk about some trauma cases that will blow your mind. Don't go away anywhere. We'll be right back. All our sponsor, Colonial Metals Group, help me with my goal of protecting my financial future. Being at the whim of the stock market or the current administration doesn't make me feel safe or secure, but having a self-directed IRA where I can safely store gold and silver, assets that have stood the test of time, no matter what the economy or the government policies are, makes sense to me. Colonial Metals Group has helped me create a self-directed IRA where I can have direct access to my assets. Let the team of experts at Colonial Metals Group help you protect your family's future. Their level of professionalism and ability to listen make it easy for you to learn everything you need to know about preserving all you've worked for. Maybe you're just thinking of getting started, or maybe you've already in a 401k or IRA. You're thinking about your parents' retirement. Regardless, Colonial Metals Group can help. We put together a special offer for our audience. Call 800-898-1841. 800-898-1841. That's 800-898-1841. Or go online to colonialmetalsgroup.com/LET radio. Returning to our conversation with Dr. Martin Greenberg, retired trauma surgeon, orthopedic surgeon from Chicago area. He's also retired police officer, trauma medic, retired from the Orland Hills Police Department. Before that, he was a police officer with Tinley Park Police Department, and he's author of the book, The Law Enforcement Medical Encyclopedia. And one of the things I find really, really intriguing about your story from your experience, Doc, is that you went from, I don't want to say the frying pan to the fire. You went from the fire to the fire. You were an orthopedic surgeon in trauma, doing trauma care, and then decided to become a police officer, and you had great reasons for doing it. But I wanted to reflect first on, because I don't think people really understand how difficult this is. When you were a trauma surgeon, you had a case with a young lady that was severely, severely injured. Am I wrong?
No, that's correct. I had actually just begun working at a level 1 trauma center in Midtown Chicago. And this was in a few weeks of actually getting on staff at that location and getting my feet wet. And we had this level 1 trauma. So with level 1 trauma centers, that means that the worst trauma will come to that hospital, and other hospitals will be bypassed to bring the most serious injuries to the level 1 trauma center. And this young lady was a teacher in her mid-20s living with her dad in Chicago. And her dad allowed her, quote-unquote, uncle, who was somehow younger than she was, to visit and stay with them. The dad then traveled to Mexico, leaving the quote-unquote uncle alone with his daughter. The uncle wanted her to be his girlfriend. She was a very nice young lady, a teacher, very conservative, and she refused. He then attacked her with a machete, striking her head and both arms, forearms, hands, on both sides, at least 50 times. She was really basically shredded with this machete, and she was brought to the level 1 trauma center. Neurosurgery was first called in to deal with her head injuries, and after the head injuries were stabilized, I was called in next, and this was again in the middle of the night. I entered the OR, and the OR, it really looked like the set of a horror movie. The walls were almost completely covered with blood. And I don't know if you've been around large amounts of blood,
yes,
but you can actually smell
You can
blood.
smell it, and you can taste it. It gets in your mustache. It gets everywhere.
Right. It's kind of an iron scent.
Right.
And this iron scent of blood actually filled the room. And the hand surgery procedure that I had to perform consisted of washing out all the multiple level, we call them segmental wounds, that were sort of transverse up and down both arms, cutting tendons, bones, muscles, nerves, and then trying to sew everything back together again and stabilize the bones, which was very challenging because as surgeons, we're taught anatomy, and we're trained how to sew or fix two ends of a divided structure, be it a muscle or a tendon or a nerve or a bone together. But in this situation, there were so many different levels of each structure that was cut, it was very difficult to decide what to attach to what. So this took about 18 hours of continuous surgery, of washing, fixing, and then applying a gadget to both arms called an external fixator. An external fixator is a gadget that includes pins that go in the bones and basically bars that hold everything together to line things up in a at least semi-acceptable temporary position.
Right.
And so we were able to do that. And she survived. Several days later, she had to go back to the operating room for another session where more repairs were performed, and permanent plates and screws were replacing the external fixator because we were then less afraid of infection problems. You can't really use plates and screws in a terrible open wound for fear of infection.
Right.
So,
and by the way, I happen to have two steel plates in my right hand and wrist. But that was done surgically, and it was done under supervised situations. So I understand that, but a lot of people don't get it. And I gotta change the subject really quickly. Number one, it's selfish reasons. I have to get these images out of my head. Secondly, I had a bad hand injury, same hand, and I injured my hand and injured a finger on it, and it was almost amputated, and they were able to save it. But what the surgeon did was he inserted 2 pins into the end of the finger. And Doc, when he said, okay, he's looking good after several months, he's like, you look good, doing great, I'm going to remove the pins. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. I'm waiting for the anesthesia. I'm waiting for the Novocaine. I'm waiting for the needle to come out. And he's like, okay, brace yourself, Bridget. Here comes some pliers, and wham! And you know what? I didn't feel a thing, but it was horrifying to see.
Well, when we put that's sort of the magical part of hand surgery. I think when we put pins in hand bones, we try and leave them just under the skin and almost tenting the skin a little bit so that we can just push on the skin, the sharp edge of the pin pops out, and then with the same little pliers, we grab it and remove it.
Oh, it was wonderful the way he did it, but I was horrified. What do you mean you're not going to do anesthesia? What do you mean you're not doing Novocaine or lidocaine or something something or other? It was quick and easy. But when I'm looking at your story, and here's a question. When I visualize these things, and I'm visualizing this young lady, her horrific injuries, all that came along with it, I can see the medical staff. I can see them working. I can't understand doing surgery for 18 hours. I don't have a point of comprehension or a point of comparison for that. But one of the things is when you're talking about it, Doc, you talk about it very clinically. You talk about it in a way, it's like you said earlier in the conversation, we are trained to solve problems. We're trained to look at something like an engineer would. And I'm more along the human aspect of it. Did you find it difficult to separate the two, or was that something that you were born and blessed with?
I never had a problem looking at anatomy or a trauma situation in a professional perspective. So
you did, and even now, you're okay with it.
Yes. And so we have a problem to solve, and we have to solve that problem however long it takes, and it's almost a meditative thing. Once you get started, you're involved with the problem until it gets resolved. And even things like going to the bathroom don't seem to be important during that time.
Oh, I can't even drive 2 hours with my wife. And number one, can't have a conversation I'm not comfortable with. But number two, we got to take a potty break. I have to. I can see your point about that. But I guess what I'm getting at is this. Did you see a big difference in your response to trauma as a trauma orthopedic surgeon compared to a police officer?
Not really, because as a police officer, we are medics, and we are looking through the lens of providing care for a medical problem. We are trained as police officers to deal with threats that may present themselves, but usually in situations like this, the medical and the tactical parts of our job don't interfere with each other.
We're going to take a short break. We're talking with Dr. Martin Greenberg, retired orthopedic trauma surgeon and retired police officer, author of the book, The Law Enforcement Medical Encyclopedia. We're going to talk more about his experience and then what prompted him to write the book. Follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. It's free. And get the latest crime and law enforcement news on the Newsbreak app. It's simple, easy, and free. Just download the Newsbreak app. Then search for and follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Keep yourself and your loved ones safe by opting for OPPS, Operational Police Protective Services. They offer armed security personnel who can protect you and ensure your safety at all times. They're dedicated to creating a safe environment, building trust, and enhancing the quality of life for their clients. They are committed to delivering quality service, safety, and security in an effective, responsive, and professional way. That's OPPS, Operational Police Protective Services. Get more details at OPPSprotection.com. Again, that's OPPSprotection.com. Return our conversation on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show with retired Dr. Martin Greenberg, a retired trauma surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, also retired police officer, just recently retired from the Orland Hills Police Department in Illinois. Before that, he was a Tinley Park, Illinois police officer, and he is author of the book, The Law Enforcement Medical Encyclopedia. Doc, before we talked about my experience as a police officer, when we had people in really bad situations, they had chest wounds and they would literally crack their chest wide open right there in the emergency room, and you had to stand there just in case they made a dying declaration. And it was, from my point of view, not good, not cool at all. And the doctors, the nurses, they all seemed to be laser focused on what they had to do. And I felt like a fish out of water. But you actually did that chest cracking more than once, didn't you?
Well, yes, we were working in conjunction with general trauma surgeons. The orthopedic surgeons usually handle the musculoskeletal injuries, and the trauma surgeons would handle the other parts of the trauma.
Now, without getting too graphic, you had a situation where, one case in particular, where you were a police officer, but you were working as a trauma surgeon, which I'll ask you the question in a moment. How did you do both? But this was a gentleman that had to have his chest cracked, and you were all part of the team that did that.
Yes, well, I was certainly on the call roster and available, and in the trauma bay when this occurred, the gentleman had a gunshot wound to the chest, was bleeding out, was dying, and as a last-ditch effort to save his life, the trauma surgeons opened the chest and cross-clamped the aorta to preserve as much blood as possible above the level of the gunshot wound or bleeding area. And they did that. They saved his life, at least temporarily. And then I was called because of problems related to a lack of blood supply to both extremities.
Right.
And the gentleman was in our trauma. We have a trauma intensive care unit that's run by the trauma service. And the gentleman was so tenuously surviving that he needed lower extremity orthopedic procedures done. But he was even too sick to take from the intensive care unit across the hall only into the operating room, because they thought just that transfer alone might kill him.
Right.
So,
and you're talking very short distance. It wasn't a long ways away.
No, it was literally across the hall. So what I was tasked with doing was bringing everything that we had in the operating room into the little ICU cubicle, which is maybe an 8x10 or 10x10 size room, and performing the orthopedic procedures on both lower extremities in that room
Right.
with all the nurses and assistants and anesthesia and surgical assistants and surgical residents that we normally have in an operating room, which could be 10 or 15 people. So we were all shoehorned into this little tiny cubicle, had to perform this extensive bilateral lower extremity procedure. And we were even given a time limit of only 40 minutes to complete the procedure on both lower extremities.
Wow. Well, one of the things I'm fairly certain of, and I got to ask you in the former question, that's not the type of environment where you can be thin-skinned. You just got to yell orders, and people are get out of my way type thing, and you can't take it personally. And that's you all really had a job to do, and it was literally life and death.
Yes, and again, we try to not make it an emotional experience. The surgeon is really the captain of the ship. You've heard that expression,
Right.
I'm sure. And so if the surgeon is in control of the situation, everybody else will also be in control. So we try and keep things calm. And it's funny, you've heard the expression dark humor.
Right.
Well, in situations like that, dark humor definitely can present itself. And I think it's something that we unconsciously do to try and calm ourselves and everyone with us.
I believe it's certainly a defense mechanism that we all need, and otherwise you go crazy.
Well, I agree, and I mean these are jokes that I probably couldn't repeat at this time. You know, that in retrospect seem a little bit inappropriate. But
well, it's not the type of humor we would share at a barbecue with our neighbors, because they'd be aghast. We're like, what is the problem? I mean, come on. I got to ask this burning question. So as a surgeon, you had really long hours. You just mentioned earlier you did surgery for 18 hours. As a police officer, it can be really long shifts. When did you find time to sleep?
Well, I had pretty much of a 40-year history of sleep deprivation. To answer your question, we were on call really 24/7 when we were in town, and that was for the SWAT team and for our medical practice. I was on call usually at 3 or 4 different hospitals simultaneously, taking trauma call and taking hand surgery call, which is a separate call schedule, as well as being on call for the SWAT team on a 24/7 basis. In fact, I had to travel around to my hospitals with all my SWAT gear in my vehicle. I had lights and sirens in all my cars so that I could leave and go to a SWAT call out right from the operating room if I had to.
Everybody else runs out for lunch or coffee, and you're like, I got to run. I got to go.
Yeah, lunch wasn't part of our schedule. That's for sure.
And here's what really impresses me. So, look, rightfully so. Doctors, surgeons, I've got several family members that are in medical school that are now, I'm not sure, I don't even know the terminology. They're residents. They've been at it for 10, 11, 12 years. And the more advanced that they are when it's cardiac care or neurology or whatever it might be, the longer their studying period. So how long did it take you to prepare for this career? And then you throw into it the added mix of being a police officer.
Well, there's college, of course, then medical school, and then in my case, a 5-year orthopedic surgery residency program, and then medical practice.
Wow.
So after that, I was in practice, as I said, for 40 years in the Chicagoland area and the suburbs, dealing with all types of trauma and hand problems. After 20 years of being the orthopedic surgeon, Columbine rolled around, and that just brought to the head a lot of these feelings that I had previously about...
That changed everything for you, and we're almost out of time. I got to ask you this question. When did you decide to write the book, The Law Enforcement Medical Encyclopedia?
Well, the book is based on teachings and articles that I had been writing over the past 20 years. You recall 9/11, of course.
Right.
And we were fairly convinced that a domestic terrorist incident would occur prior to 9/11. And for about a year prior to 9/11, we were publishing articles regarding nuclear, biological, chemical, and explosive terrorism through the Illinois Tactical Weapons Association newsletter. And when 9/11 occurred, we were the only group really that had an entire suite of these articles available for publication. And so we then had to present all this again to the medical community, and I was asked to give the keynote address at the Chicago Medical Society Midwest Clinical Conference on Navy Pier in Chicago, which is like a big multi-state medical annual meeting. And so we had a 4-hour keynote address going through every type of nuclear, biologic, chemical, and explosive terrorism problem. The articles got reprinted in multiple journals of the medical journal, and we were trying to basically inform the medical community of what was involved here, since this was never part of their training.
Wow. I'm amazed. And I imagine it's the type of book that's not on the shelf of Barnes & Noble.
It is.
Get
Actually, it was published through Dorrance Publishers, and it's available through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, and even BooksAMillion.com. So it's
Dr. Greenberg, I appreciate your story so much. Thanks for your service, and thanks for being a guest on the show. All very much appreciated.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. A huge thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast version of the Law Enforcement Talk radio show, by the way, which is a nationally syndicated radio show, and we broadcast on over 115 radio stations across the United States to more than 44 million combined population. If you like our show, there's 2 simple things you can do. Go to our website, letradio.com. Add your favorites. Check it often. You can find episodes of the show right there. And the second one involves our Facebook page. It's so easy to find great content, including past episodes of the show. And when you see something that you like, that resonates with you, be sure to share it with your friends. We'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.